Hello, welcome to Fun with History with Professor Banks. This is our second lesson of Fun with History with Professor Banks. And today, we're going to look at the Ice Ages. What were they all about? We're about to find out. That's our catchy little introduction now. I hope you like it. It's our introduction music to the history lessons. But today, we are looking at the Ice Ages. So let's dive into this, shall we? The Ice Ages. But first, I want to share a joke with you about the Ice Ages. So let me share a joke. It was so cold, we had to stop eating with metal cutlery. Some people walked around for days with spoons or forks stuck to their tongues. It was so cold, hitchhikers were holding up pictures of thumbs. It was so cold, roosters were rushing into Kentucky Fried Chicken and begging to use the pressure cooker. It was so cold, when I dialed 911, a recorded message said to phone back in the spring. It was so cold, kids were using a new excuse to stay up late. But Mom, my pajamas haven't thawed out yet. It was so cold, pickpockets were sticking their hands in strangers' pockets just to keep them warm. It was so cold that I chipped a tooth on my soup. It was so cold that Grandpa's teeth were chattering in the glass. It was so cold, the rats were bribing the alley cats for a snuggle. It was so cold, we had to chop up the piano for firewood, but we only got 2 cords. It was so cold that when we milked the cows, we got ice cream. When we milked the brown cows, we got chocolate ice cream. It was so cold, words froze in the air. If you wanted to hear what someone said, you had to grab a handful of sentences and take them in by the fire. It was so cold, we pulled everything out of the freezer and huddled inside it to warm up. And this is the most funniest. It was so cold, when we parked the sled, we either had to plug in the dogs or keep them running in place. So that is a little bit of an Ice Age breaker on the Ice Ages. Anyway, I hope you enjoy those jokes. Anyway, let's get into the Ice Ages, shall we? Let's get into the Ice Ages. So I'm going to try to use my whiteboard here and not have to go back and forth. So the Ice Ages. There has been quite a few Ice Ages over the time span of the Earth. And really, the Earth We talked about how the earth was formed last week in creation. We talked about how old the earth is. But humans came on the scene about 2.3 million years ago. Just to give you a perspective on that, humans came on the stage about 2.3 million years ago. So the Ice Age, why have there been so many ice ages? I think that's the biggest question we need to ask, is why do these ice ages happen? Well, I'm going to give you, basically, I'm going to share with you the 5 major ice ages over the span of our time. So, and then I'm going to talk more about them as we go on here today in our history lesson. Okay, hopefully you can understand that. Let me get this better in view here. There we go. Okay, so those are our 5 major ice age periods right there, and I'm going to go into them in a few minutes. But first, I'm going to explain why do these ice ages happen? Why have these ice ages happened? And basically, well, why and how do they know that these happened? Basically, the ice ages happen from a few different factors. A few different things can factor into why we have these ice ages. Number one, if there's a change in the current of the ocean. So the oceans are big, and obviously the currents in the ocean change quite a bit. So any little changes in the ocean currents mean that it's going to significantly impact the atmosphere as well. So sometimes if the ocean currents have changed, it leads to a changing of the atmosphere. So that's one factor. Another one is just the position. It's just the composition of the atmosphere at the time. So by that I mean, when the ice ages happened, what was a contributing factor when those ice ages happened, quite most of the time, was there was a low level of greenhouse gases present in the atmosphere. And when I mean greenhouse gases, I'm talking about things like carbon dioxide. So, so you got these low level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, combined with a change in the ocean's current. And it doesn't even have to be major. It can be very slight, the changes in the ocean's current. And then sometimes a third factor is, and this has happened over history too, is that where the Earth is in position to the Sun. So sometimes, obviously that even happens now. When we have winter, the Sun is further away from the Earth, and that's how come it's colder. That's how come we don't get as much sunlight during the winter. And I must admit, I am not a huge fan of winter. I love the summer, and winters, I just don't like the cold and snow. But it's because the Earth has rotated and the sun is further away from the Earth. So, in the ice ages, what happened was change in the ocean's current combined with the low level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, combined with the position of the Earth in relation to the sun, and those are like the three big factors in terms of what happened contributing to an ice age. So what happens in an ice age, basically, it's not rocket science. What happens in an ice age is the Earth gets very cold, and it's cold for a great amount of time. So generally, in the ice age, more of the Earth is covered with ice than not covered with ice. And that's what defines an ice age, more or less. So what you get is much colder temperatures, and it never rains, it only snows. So as it continues to snow, we continue to get a form of ice on the Earth, and that's what contributes to the ice ages. Now, we still have some of the world that's very, very cold, obviously. Like the Arctic is, relatively speaking, very cold. And relatively speaking, the Earth up there is very cold. However, many of you have heard of global warming, and that's happening now. So up in the Arctic, it's actually getting warmer than it usually is, and that's a concern for a lot of people in terms of this ice that's starting to melt up in the Arctic and how that's going to impact the rest of the world. But we still have a much colder atmosphere up in the Arctic right now, no doubt, than generally speaking the rest of the Earth. So now I want to touch on the evidence of ice ages in this lesson, and I also want to touch a bit about the animals that lived in that time period, which actually serve as a form of evidence as well that these ice ages happened. Now, the biggest animals that we had living in the ice age there was 5 types of them. I'm going to list them to you. There was the woolly mammoth, the woolly rhinos, cave bears. We also had horses, wolves, bison, and reindeer. And now, basically the mammoth and the woolly rhinos and the cave bears are all extinct now. They don't exist in any form. And so those animals are past us now. However, now in 2016 we still have horses, and we have wolves, and we have bison and reindeer. We still have those animals present, but the first 3 I listed are now extinct. And that's actually a form of proof that essentially that the ice ages happened, because one reason they know this is because of skeletons. Proof. Skeletons of mammoth and rhinos. Okay, can you see that? So proof. Skeletons of mammoth and rhinos have been found. So that's one proof in itself that the ice ages happened. And now I want to also tell you some other evidence of the ice ages happening. Basically, a lot of geographical evidence has been discovered over the years of the ice ages. Essentially, they have found some polished bedrock in many places. And this bedrock didn't develop just on its own. It was bedrock that was eroded, that something obviously eroded it, and scientists have concluded that what's eroded this bedrock has been the massive movement of glaciers and ice during these ice ages. So basically, in the ice ages, we had the ice staying around for a long time, then it warmed up, and so these giant glaciers and ice started to melt, and as they melted, they shifted and they moved, and they caused some impact in the Earth's atmosphere that we see today, and one of them being polished bedrock. And we also see other evidence, such as rock scouring and scratching. So there's a lot of rocks spread over our Earth, and quite a few of those are scoured and scratched. We have valley cutting. And now I don't know, that's a very technical term, but basically what that means is, you got valleys and you got hills. So hills and valleys. And why have we got lower levels of ground and then higher levels of ground? Scientists have concluded that's due to the ice ages, due to the massive movement of ice and glaciers over those ice ages that thawed out and started to kind of push their way down the atmosphere of the Earth. And then we have the mountaintops, obviously, as opposed to the valleys, but we have the mountaintops, and that is due to how the ice moved around and thawed out when it thawed out. So, and then glacier moraines and drumlins. So basically, this is all geological evidence that ice ages indeed did happen, and that they were present, and that they happened just like they documented they did. So let me talk a little bit about the ice ages, about what times, a period that they happened, and generally speaking, what happened in these. And this is just gonna kind of be numbers for you, but I've listed them here on my board. So the first ice age that really happened was called the Uranian Ice Age, and ironically enough, we have a Lake Huron present in our word, one of the Great Lakes. But this was 2,400 to 2,100 million years ago. So that was the first real ice age right there. The Uranian Ice Age, 2,400 to 21 million years ago. So, I think that's how you say it, Huronian. A second ice age that has been documented by scientists and historians is called the Cyogenian Ice Age, and this happened 850 to 635 million years ago. So 850 to 635 million years ago. And again, these are just numbers. Probably not the most exciting thing, the numbers, but I'm just giving you a general idea of the names of the ice ages and when they happened in the history of the planet. Okay, and the third one is called Adian I love how these people have named these ice ages. Not giving them the most easiest names in the world. Andean Saharan. Okay, so that was 460 to 430. 460 to 430 million years ago. That ice age. And then we got the most easiest name to say in the ice ages, and I love this name, the Kahoo Ice Age. Kahoo. Okay, and this ice age happened from 360 to 250 million years ago. So that's 360 to 250 million years ago. And then the last major ice age that has been documented is called the Pleistocene era. And that's 1.8 million years ago to 111,700 years ago. So that's obviously the most recent one in our lifetime, the Pleistocene one. And again, that went from 1.8 million to 111,700 years ago. And that was called the Pleistocene Ice Age. And this is an ice age that is significant because it's the first ice age that coincides with really the first signs of humans living on the earth. And humans found it hard to get food during that time because it was so cold. And you've probably seen the classic pictures on different sites of cavemen. They're all dressed up, all warm and surrounded by ice. So that's kind of the ice age that is most significant in terms of human beings, the Pleistocene one, because that's really the first one where humans were kind of around at that time. So now in this ice age, I just want to give you a little bit of facts about it. Ice covered all of Antarctica. It covered a large part of Europe. It covered all of North America, South America, and there were small areas in Asia even covered by ice during this time period. So that's really how great the extent of the ice age was in that period, as well as previous periods, more or less, how much ice was on the Earth. So essentially, in the last major ice age, over a third of the Earth was covered in ice. Covered in ice. So that gives that like a third of the Earth is pretty big. 1/3. One third of the Earth covered in ice. Now what happens in these ice ages is, generally speaking, the ice covers a lot of the Earth and it stays that way for a while, but then it warms up. So you get a change either in the ocean current, or you get a change in the relation of the sun to the Earth, or just more greenhouse gases present in the Earth's atmosphere starts to break up that ice, starts to warm up the atmosphere, and then we get rid of the ice. So it's fascinating, the ice ages, really, because there's been so many of them. And hopefully I have taught you a little bit more about these ice ages in this lesson. And again, what I want you to get is how many there have been. So essentially, as I said, there have been 5 of them, and they started 2,400 million years ago, and went up to 111,700 years ago, these ice ages. So, a lot of ice ages. And it's been documented, as I said. They have done a lot of studies on it. They have discovered why. They have figured out, why there's all these rocks and valleys and mountains in the atmosphere. And they have found skeletons of these extinct animals that lived during those times. So, a rather fascinating subject. But I just wanted to talk about the ice ages to give you an idea of them, and because they are important and they form a part of our history. I think that's all I want to say about the ice ages. And now, as we move on our history lessons, next week I want to talk about the beginning of human civilization. Really the first sign of human civilization that we have documented. So I'm going to get into that next week, and then we're going to start tracing through human history, through the different periods of time, through the different civilizations, and give you some understanding of how that shaped our current heritage today. So next week, I'm going to talk about the beginning of human civilization. Until then, take care, and we will look at the beginning of human civilization next week. And maybe it'll be a little bit more exciting than the ice ages. Until next time, take care.